We're just hours away from week 5 fantasy football starting up here, and it is time to get into the most disrespected, underappreciated, and under-discussed position in fantasy football, which is the kicker position. We do it every single week. We're going through the top 12 kicker rankings for week 5 fantasy football here. And guys, I am the only fantasy football YouTuber out there who does weekly kicker rankings every single week. So I need you to go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support, guys. So let's go ahead and just dive right into these kickers right now. So first up, I've got Jake Elliott once again at here at number 1, taking on the Los Angeles Rams in Los Angeles this week. Really, the past several weeks, Jake Elliott's been number 1, and he deserves it. Look at his numbers on the screen. Nobody can tell us that kickers don't matter in fantasy football. Why? Because he's averaging 14.8 fantasy points per game. To put that into context, guys, let's go through some wide receivers who are in that range as well. You've got Adam Thielen at 14.2 fantasy points per game. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 14.1 fantasy points per game. DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, 12.9 fantasy points per game. Jake Elliott is really playing a pivotal part in helping people win weeks right now. He's been almost perfect on every single kick he's made. He's only missed 2 kicks this year, and he's making tons of long field goals. The dude's got plenty of legs still, 61-yard long. And this week against the Rams, I think that this could be actually a higher scoring game than some people may think of right now. The Eagles offense is starting to hum, and the Rams offense is actually looking a lot better than I thought, and they're getting Cooper Kupp back in all likelihood. I think this matchup could be a very good scoring matchup. I think Jake Elliott's going to continue to do well in fantasy this week. Number 2, I've got Brett Maher this week in that same matchup here against Philadelphia. Brett Maher has been great in fantasy as well. 13.8 fantasy points per game. Now, he's missed several field goals this year. That's not a good thing. And in fact, that's the reason that the Dallas Cowboys let him walk, is because he was largely inaccurate over the past several years. 4 missed field goals so far this year. He's still got leg, though. 54-yard long field goal, and they're giving him a bunch of field goal attempts. That's the key right there. Volume is king in fantasy football. That applies to kickers as well. 16 field goal opportunities, because like I talk about on kicker videos a lot, kickers are great when they're on middle to above average offenses. Offenses that get you down there, get you in range, but don't always capitalize. That's the Rams story this year. They've given him lots of field goal opportunities. Against this defense, I think it's going to be the same thing. They'll get him close, they'll get him in range, but they're not going to get down there and capitalize and be efficient in the red zone, leaving a lot of field goal opportunities for Brett Maher this week. Number 3, Tyler Bass in Buffalo. This guy has been also great as well. Tyler Bass has been really a great kicker in the last several years of fantasy football. 12.5 fantasy points per game, and he's been perfect on everything. Hasn't missed a kick all season. This guy's a really, really good kicker in the league, aside from fantasy football, but in fantasy football specifically, I'm interested to see how this team travels to London and does against Jacksonville, who, by the way, that's basically their second home. Jacksonville basically has a second home base in London. I'm interested to see how it goes. They're rolling right now, so I can't imagine they're going to take a step back offensively. Moving on to number 4, we've got Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys taking on the San Francisco 49ers. This one's so interesting to me. This guy came out of nowhere, and he's immediately a top 5 fantasy football kicker, and he deserves it. I mean, this guy's been almost perfect. Only 1 missed extra point, and again, the volume is there. Dallas's offense is getting you down there in range, but they're not always capitalizing. 13 field goal attempts this year for the Dallas Cowboys, and he's averaging 12.8 fantasy points per game. So the reason he's not higher, I would put him above Tyler Bass, but I do think that Dallas's offense will be capped because of the San Francisco 49ers defense this week. That's my opinion on how the game script's going to go. And if you want more info on exactly why I think that, go watch the defense ranking video from earlier today. I think Brandon Aubrey is still going to be great. He'll probably still get at least 4 field goal attempts, and I think that's the way it's going to go. It'll hit all of them unless they're like completely out of his range. Jake Moody at number 5 here. Same matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Jake Moody's been great as well in fantasy football. Perfect on everything. Perfect on field goals, perfect on extra points. 11.3 fantasy points per game, 57-yard long field goal. This guy is simply just a very, very good kicker. And again, Dallas's defense is probably going to hold them to like 20 to 24-ish points. This is going to be largely low scoring, and I do think that the kickers will come out and have some good fantasy games this week. That's why they're both back-to-back at 4 and 5 this week. Number 6, I've got Matt Gay in his second week on this list, of the Indianapolis Colts, taking on the Tennessee Titans this week in Indianapolis. Listen, Matt Gay has been pretty good in fantasy this year as well. This guy is not getting as many field goal opportunities so far, but I think that this offense, honestly, they're going to start to really hit a groove here soon. Like, Anthony Richardson looks great. Michael Pittman looks great. The offensive coaching is spectacular. I think he's going to start getting more opportunities, and what better week to do it against the Tennessee Titans defense that is not good through the air. Now, it's a divisional matchup, and like we discussed last week, divisional matchups usually leave good fantasy points for field goal kickers, which is exactly why he's here at number 6. Again, Nick Folk, that same matchup here against the Indianapolis Colts. Divisional game, and Nick Folk's been great this year. Perfect offense. 10 field goal attempts, he's made all 10 of them. He's still got leg. 6 extra point attempts, made all 6 of them. 10.8 fantasy points per game. He's perfect, and he gets field goal opportunities, and it's a divisional matchup against a pretty tough defense. All the boxes are checked here for me with Nick Folk in particular. Number 8, Kyrie Fairbairn of the Houston Texans this week, taking on the Atlanta Falcons. He's got to be in this list right now. He's averaging 10.5 fantasy points per game, and he's missed only 1 kick this year. The dude's been really, really solid in fantasy football. Now, his longest is 39, which is a little bit concerning, but I don't think he doesn't have the leg for it. Really, their offense has been super efficient this year. That's been a very efficient offense, and they're getting better. That's the thing about the Houston Texans. So, honestly, I think Houston could blow out Atlanta this week, which, depending on how many touchdowns they score, could be a good or bad thing. But Kyrie Fairbairn, at this point, like, he's done so well, he has to be inside the top 10 right now. Number 9, I've got Brandon McManus of the Jacksonville Jaguars in that London game this weekend. So Brandon McManus is in a situation where, again, they're a home team basically. Like, that's their home base. And he's been pretty good in fantasy this year. Now, he has missed 2 field goal attempts, but his longest is 56, so he still has the leg here. 9.3 fantasy points per game. Brandon McManus is in a good situation here because Buffalo's defense is going to put the clamps on Jacksonville, meaning Jacksonville's offense will probably get them down there several times. Brandon McManus kicks a couple 50 to 40 yard long field goals, gets you your fantasy points you need. That's all you need. That's all you need from your kicker. And I think that this is a matchup here that Brandon McManus could do very, very well in. And at number 10 here, I've got Matt Prater of the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Cincinnati Bengals this week. I've discussed this several times this week. I think Arizona actually could beat the Cincinnati Bengals this week. I think it could happen. Joe Burrow is not healthy. This defense is not good without Joe Burrow. Like, Joe Burrow is the heart and soul of this team, and they all look deflated right now. And Arizona, they're kicking plenty of field goals. Matt Prater, 10 field goal opportunities, 62 yard long field goal. This guy has been in this league for a long time, and he still has the leg. 9.5 fantasy points per game. Their offense is not great. Obviously, they're not a great offense. Really, they're more gritty than anything. This is just a gritty football team right now. They're actually playing very good football, and they're keeping up with opponents, which has led to a lot of field goal attempts for Matt Prater. Matt Prater is actually one of my favorite kickers in fantasy football right now because of the offense he's in. They get you down there sometimes, and then he can kick a very long field goal. That's what we're looking for here, and I think he's going to have plenty of those opportunities once again against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Number 11 here, I've got Harrison Butker finally sneaking inside the top 12 for me because he's taken on the Minnesota Vikings this week. Honestly, here's the secret to this. I think this could be a high-scoring game, but I think what happens is they jump out to an early lead against the Vikings, and then the Vikings get a lot of points in garbage time because that's what they do. That's what Kirk Cousins does. But Harrison Butker, to me, he's in a situation where he's just outside the top 12 as far as fantasy kickers go so far. He's averaging 9 fantasy points per game, and he's been perfect on every single one of them. But again, look at the long rate here, 41 yards. That shows you, and the field goal attempts, they're just an efficient offense. And of course you know that. Everybody knows the Chiefs is an efficient offense. That's kind of the ceiling drawback here for Harrison Butker. The ceiling just isn't as high in this Kansas City offense for a fantasy kicker. While that sounds counterintuitive, that's the truth about fantasy football kickers. So while I do think the matchup is good here for him to score plenty of points, he's just never going to be a guy that's going to be really highly ranked in these kicker rankings unless they start kicking more field goals. Number 12, Jason Sanders sneaking inside the top 12 this week of the Miami Dolphins because they're taking on the New York Giants. There's going to be points galore. I mean, listen, Jason Sanders was good in fantasy football the week that they blew out the Denver Broncos, and they scored 10 touchdowns in that game. Like, they didn't kick a field goal. He's only kicked 6 field goals this year, and he's only made 4 of them. So this guy, like, he's not even that accurate, and he's still averaging 8 fantasy points per game because he's on a great explosive offense. I'm expecting at least 30 points from the Miami Dolphins this weekend. They're going to get after it because they're probably pissed off for how bad they got exposed against the Bills. I think Jason Sanders is going to do just fine in fantasy this week. So let me know what you think of the kicker rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for week 5 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for week 5 fantasy football, click on this video right here.